Mikol Torah Mitzuka, Mikol Negu Machala, Yishlach, Yerachom Atzlacha, V'chol Masei Yedehem, Yadber Saninu Tachtehem, V'yatrei B'ches Yeshua, Uvater Titzachon, V'yishmor, V'yitzor, Esachem Beis Yisrael, Hashmuyir V'ashmuyot, V'esnederei Tzvadano Yisrael V'shmuyot, V'yvarech V'yilapeh Yitzchol Atzuim, V'yogein Al Kol Ha'omdim B'sakona, V'kuyam V'chamozo, Ki Adonai Leichem, Alech Imochem, Yilachem Lachem, Emoy Leichem, L'shi Yashem V'neimar. Amen. Thank you for coming this evening. You mentioned several times that the zechuyos davening and the zechuyos of learning are zechuyos that Chazal explained to us, zechuyos that protect our people, that we get together to learn together. Darshan Pasuk of those you related B'Sharei Yerushalayim, that was B'Sharei Torah, B'Sharei Halacha. And David HaMelech understood that the merit of those who study Torah will protect Klal Yisrael. And if we have this period of time when the troops are all and the Lum are all called up and poised, and yet for various reasons are refraining from going into it, the Baruch was giving us more time to learn more, to daven more, to do tshuva. The Baruch was giving us time to appreciate the severity of the situation and respond the way Klal Yisrael is supposed to respond. So this evening we come together to learn together. I'm grateful to the adult and committee that put together this evening and invited our speakers, publicized, and of course to those who sponsored this evening, the Tovin and Kindler, who do so in memory of their parents, supported Tzal. Several people who supported this evening in honor of all the parents who have children in Tzal. We're grateful to Nav and Josh Gottesman, Zecher, Nishmas, Josh's grandfather, Yisrael Iyun, and David Meir, and Leil Nishmas, those lives that we lost, Shmini Atzeres, and we're grateful to Shira and David Grieber, sponsored in memory of Leil Nishmas, those who were lost over the course of Simchas Torah, and Talmiz and Yaakov Achavam, Nishmas, Estemal, and Bas Yisrael Yosef. Begin this evening's learning with the word from Glenn, who has headed the committee to raise funds and allocate funds, and just to give us a picture of the where our funds are holding and where they're going.
Thank you, Ravi. A really quick update on our shul's fundraising and allocations to help out in Eretz Yisrael. The community has really responded so generously, contributing towards and funding countless initiatives. Specifically in our shul, we have a committee helping the Rav and the discretionary fund with allocations of contributions to the Rabbi's discretionary fund for the Israel initiative. The committee has carefully evaluated where we can be effective and provide meaningful aid through reliable channels, balancing long and short-term needs. Over 200 families have participated thus far, a tremendous testament to our TEHILLIM, and the needs are great. Whatever you could do to help is appreciated. You can pledge on the shul's website. There's a link there, or we created a little shorter link, tinyurl.com//CBA support Israel. tinyurl.com//CBA support Israel, easy to remember. A quick sample of the types of initiatives we've helped. We provided warm clothing, partnering with local organizations, getting it directly to soldiers in Yehuda Shomron and by the Lebanese border, which have been very cold, especially at night recently. We worked with Ezrat Achim to provide food and Shabbos meals for displaced families from the south and north who are temporarily displaced to Beit Shemesh. We worked with One Family Fund to adopt 4 families and provide psychological and other assistance to those who lost everything, where many families are injured in the hospital. We worked with Salash to provide groceries to families of soldiers where the primary breadwinner is not working due to reserve duty, while the other caretaker is home with the kids due to displacement from school. And just Erev Shabbos, we announced our partnership with Leil Iyun to provide PTSD and other psychological support to our Chayalim. Any help is greatly appreciated, and we are continuing to find new ways to help. For those who haven't joined yet to contribute, and those who would like to increase, please know that the needs are great and will continue to be. Please contribute at tinyurl.com/CBA support Israel. Thank you very much.
That our Magidei Shur this evening required introduction to our Tzibur and RaV Weinberg, and but it does give us an opportunity to express our Koras HaTov, our various Magidei Shir this evening. Rav Moshe Tzvi Weinberg was our Chosn Torah on Shvias Eretz, and we are misfollowed in all of the brachos that we discussed, as we called it, the Chosn Torah, should all become Mikuyomis. But perhaps that moment in time also speaks to the position in the Achrayas that Rav Weinberg, together with Rav Cohen and myself, have at this particular time, and the Achrayas that Rav Weinberg has stepped up both in Yeshiva and our community. It is a source that we have a person of such talent, a person of such an adid nefesh, such a delicate soul, that these times can provide chizuk to individuals, chizuk to the tzibur, can provide insight, provide learning and inspiration. And it's with that expression of a Koras HaTov that I ask for Weinberg to begin.
Parshas Noach, Parshas Noach. I want to thank as well the Leil Iyun committee for putting together tonight. And I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Today was the yard site for Moshe ben Yehuda Machir, a holy Jew from the 16th century, lived in Tzfat, same time period as the Beis Yosef, the Alshich HaKadosh, the Rizal, the author of a slim volume called the Seder Hayom. The Seder Hayom is about a lot of different things, Kishmo Keno. But the Seder Hayom, whether you realize it or not, is the source for a tefillah that was accepted by all of Klal Yisrael. Tefillah that we begin our day with, Moda Ani Lefanecha, Melech Chai V'Kayam, Shechazarti Bi Nishmasi B'Chemla, Rabba Emunas. Start every morning by thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for restoring our soul. Rabba Emunasecha, Kadosh Baruch Hu, you're so incredibly faithful to us. But I was thinking today, since it was his yard site, it's a sefer that I like, and I enjoy, and what a beautiful tefillah that somehow had the siyata d'shmaya to be makubal, to be accepted by all of us. I was thinking that I really want to begin tonight just by saying, Moda Ani Lefanecha, thank you Hashem, for Klal Yisrael. You look around the room, we all had a busy Shabbos of davening and learning. And the first thing we do after Shabbos is we get together to daven and to live. That's an incredible thing. And I think it's an expression of Shechazarta Bi Nishmasi, when you see the Neshama of Klal Yisrael, when you see how the Jewish people respond in times of need. We hear what Glenn was describing, the incredible outpouring of chesed, of generosity, again, under the leadership of our Rabbanim, to be able to provide for people in so many different ways. And the short term, the long term, to have the eyes to recognize the different needs, is an incredible thing. And Rabba Emunah Sechla is not only a declaration of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's faithfulness, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wakes us up in the morning, something we should never take for granted, but it's also a testament to the Emunah of Klal Yisrael. Rabba Emunah Sechla. We can say thank you to Hashem for implanting within each and every one of us an incredible Emunah that I think we've come to see in these times. I often find that in difficult times I gravitate towards the writings of the Chafetz Chaim. Certain, first the Chafetz Chaim is the Chafetz Chaim, needs no explanation. But the Chafetz Chaim was a person of incredible emunah, incredible insight, incredible pashtus in the way that he writes, with the depth at the same time. And just the other day I was learning the Sefer Likutei Amarim of the Chafetz Chaim, a very small compendium published in Petrikov, Central Poland, 1928, Chafetz Chaim's lifetime. And in Perek Yud, he writes something that I found so incredibly comforting. Each chapter is a different topic, very brief. But Chafetz Chaim writes, "Hinei af sheyadu alacha." We all know the asr laharher achar midosav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We don't have permission to question Hashem. It's asr for us to wonder, how does Hashem run the world? We're not allowed to ask about the hanhaga of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem knows exactly what He's doing. Ki b'vadei hadin ito. Hashem knows tziduk hadin. U'drachav tzadikim v'yasharim. Hashem's ways are righteous and true. Mikol makom. Listen to these words of the Chafetz Chaim, and I think a night like tonight, to reflect and to learn and to daven, to try to grapple, is exactly what the Chafetz Chaim is describing. Mikol makom muter la'ad. It is permitted for a person, from that place of Rabba Emunah Sechla, la'atzio u'lahapil ta'anoso b'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Al kol tzara u'pega shakar. We have a right, with our emunah, to ask of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to display and to present our tainos, our complaints, our grievances before HaKadosh Baruch Hu for every tzara. For the small things in life, like the flat tire on the side of the road or stubbing your toe and get out of bed in the morning. To the tzaros we've been seeing, Eisar Yaakov. And not only do we have permission, says the Chafetz Chaim, but in fact, the Kodesh Baruch Hu ba'atzmo ma'over la'ad. Hashem encourages us to get together, to talk. I've been paying so much attention to TEHILLIM. It's incredible what David was doing in TEHILLIM. It's not all displays of confidence in Hashem. It comes from a deep place of emunah, but it's a lot of times. It's a lot of complaints. It's a lot of grappling. It's Rabbanu Shalom, where are you? Have you forgotten us? And David Melech at the same time is saying, I know you haven't forgotten. But if that's true, so then where are you? Hashem is over us. She is sadr ta'anosa v'tzarosa l'fanav, to ask, to present our questions, our challenges, to grapple with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he ends the paragraph with an amazing pasuk in Yeshaya, Parak Samad Beis, V'al titnu dami lo. Metzudas David explains, Al titnu dami lo. Don't let Hashem get away with silence. Keep pushing. Chafetz Chaim goes on to explain, he says, it's like we see what's happening in some of the big medinos. In the footnote, he says what we see happening in America at the time. That people are petitioning the government for certain things that they demand, and if you push enough, sometimes you get what you want. He writes in the footnote, people want to bring the relatives over from Europe. And they keep rallying and they keep petitioning. And when you ask enough, when you petition enough, and you write enough letters, and you rally enough, and Alachas Kam B'Kama, when we come before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we say, Rabbanu Shalom, we insist, we're going to daven and daven and daven and daven until we get what we want, which is the Gula Shlema, of course, the safety and security of Klal Yisrael. It says in Rabbi Yeshaya, V'al titnu dami lo. Don't allow HaKadosh Baruch Hu to remain silent. Ad yichonein v'ad yosim es Yerushalayim tehillah ba'aretz. Until Yerushalayim is restored to the glory that it's supposed to be. These are the words of the Heilig Chafetz Chaim. And it struck a chord with me because that's the feeling that I feel, and I'm sure many of us feel. That we're grappling with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. We're davening, we're questioning, but from a place of Rabba Amunah Sechel, of incredible Amunah, we see the Amunah of Klal Yisrael. My dear Rebbeim and friends, Rabbi Judah Michelle this week pointed out an insight of the Mishnah that I shared in a different context in the Drasha this morning. Mishnah Masechah Sota Daf Mem Daled. The Mishnah says when it comes to a Melchemes Mitzvah, Hakol Yotze, everyone goes out. Everyone has to get involved. That's what the Mishnah describes. So Rabbi Judah pointed out this week, he said Hakol Yotze means not only does everyone have to get involved, but Hakol Yotze, everything's on the table. Hakol Yotze, we have to put it all out there. We have to put out the depth of our Amunah, we have to put out the depth of our pain. We have to put it all out there. There's nothing that we can't say to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It comes from a place of tremendous Amunah. And we're grappling, we're trying to figure it out. Baruch Hashem, there's been a lot of simchas in the neighborhood recently, a lot of children born. Last Friday night I was sitting with someone at a Shalom Zachar, and he turned to me and he said, what are we supposed to feel on Shabbos? Are we supposed to feel the oneg, the joy of Shabbos? We're here celebrating a simcha. At the same time, we're thinking about the Tzara, we're thinking about our Yisrael, we're thinking about a war that's taking place, mamish at the same time. So what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to go back and forth from the highs to the lows. And I said, that's not a chiddush by a Jew. To be able to say that we have lofty moments, lowly moments, we have joyous moments and tragic moments, that's not a chiddush. That's not what Klal Yisrael is. That's every human being. Every human being has moments of joy and moments of pain. What we're going through right now, what Klal Yisrael is feeling right now, is this ability, or we're grappling with it, but we're trying to internalize this ability to live with both at the same time. The Jewish heart has the ability to feel two things at the same time. It's not a steer and it's not a contradiction. It's not that we go into Shabbos and we block out the news and we eat our children and kugel and we forget what's happening here in Israel. And it's not that when we hear about the tzaros and the difficulties that we wallow in our pain and we lose our simchas chayim, our simchas shal mitzvah. The novelty and the depth of a Jewish heart, the Rabba Amunah Sechel of the Jewish heart, is the ability to contain two opposite things at the same time. The Alter of Slobodka once invited one of the great Baalei Musar to Slobodka to give a shmuz. He gave a drasha, very fiery drasha. He spoke very strongly towards the Talmidim in Slobodka. And after, the Alter of Slobodka was very taken aback by it. He was very hurt by the way that this individual spoke to his Talmidim. And he said, how do you speak to my Talmidim? This is not a shmuz for the Talmidim in Slobodka. Slobodka was focused on godless Adam, carrying oneself with great dignity. He said, you can't talk down to my Talmidim then. He was very hurt by it, he was very upset. Rav Yitzchak Hutner, who was a Talmud in Slobodka at the time, went over to the Alter of Slobodka afterwards. And he said to him, Rebbe, I don't understand. He said, I was watching you while this darshan was speaking. I watched you the entire time he was speaking, and you were crying, you were so moved. I saw you were internalizing his words. And then you jump up out of your seat after and say, how dare you speak to my Talmidim? And the Alter of Slobodka said the following to Rav Yitzchak Hutner. He said to Rav Hutner, a thing and its opposite, a contradiction, a paradox, are among the ways of the Kadosh Baruch Hu himself. A thing and its opposite are among the ways of the Kadosh Baruch Hu himself. How are we supposed to feel it? We're supposed to be sad, we're supposed to be scared. We're supposed to be hopeful, optimistic, joyous as we hear successes, pained by the losses. It's a lot of different things, it's a lot of different emotions. But the novelty, the depth of a Jewish heart is that somehow we find the strength. We see it, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. It doesn't remove the pain, but it's a beautiful thing to experience. To see how Klal Yisrael finds a way to grapple with all the different emotions. As David Melech writes in the second parak of TEHILLIM, Ivdu es Hashem be'yira v'gilu b'ra'ad. And as the Gemara explains in Brachos Daf Lamed, b'makom gila sham tehei ra'ad. In the very place where a person is experiencing gila, when there's a messianic fervor, as there should be, because when big things happen in the world, we have to talk more about Mashiach. We have to wake up to that reality and to make it real for ourselves. But at the same time, there's a ra'ada, there's a trepidation, because I don't know what Mashiach looks like. And I don't want there to be any more sacrifices along the way. We've suffered enough through 2,000 years of galus. The makom gila sham tehei ra'ada. That's the novelty of Klal Yisrael. That's the depth of the Jewish people. They have sometimes very intense highs and very intense lows, but somehow they all come together in a deep and mysterious way. Rabbeinu Yonah on that Gemara in Maseches Brachos, that Lamed and base. Rabbeinu Yonah writes, what does it mean? B'makom gila shamtei rada. It says Rabbeinu Yonah, gila and rada, rejoicing and trepidation, they seem like opposites. Al kain tzarich la'arvei zem zeh. Rabbeinu Yonah says, don't hesitate to mingle the two, to bring together the feelings. Kidei sheyeh al kav hamamutza. Because there's a healthy balance of a person who's able, there's a breath of a person's soul that's able to somehow contain the gila and the rada. And he writes, She'afal pi she'etzel basar v'dam, ha'yira v'asimcha, heim davar v'hifufa. And even though from the human side of ourselves, not the neshama side of ourselves, not the godly side of ourselves, but the very human basar v'dam side of ourselves, yira, simcha are opposites. But when a person understands that I carry within myself the divine spark, when a person realizes how awesome it is, the awesome responsibility of being a Jew, that comes with such a deep sense of pride that we're feeling now when we see Mika Amcha Yisrael, we see the incredible efforts the Jewish people are making at this time. We step back and we say, Moda ani lefanecha, Rabba emunasecha. Not only is a Kadosh Baruch Hu faithful to us, but Rabba emunasecha. We look at each other and we say, look how deep the emunah of the Jews. One of the first days after we first heard everything happening in Eretz Yisrael, I was sitting with my wife on the couch, we were talking. We were trying to figure out, like, what are we supposed to feel? Everyone wants to know, what's the feeling, what's the avoda? What is Hashem asking of us? It can be very confusing at times. And all of a sudden, I posed a series of questions with great simplicity. I'll pose them to you tonight. Not anything earth-shattering. Let's try to ask them in a real way. I said to my wife, I said, do we believe in Hashem? Of course we believe in Hashem. But in these moments where it's really overwhelming, let's ask ourselves in a real way, do we believe in Hashem? Do we believe that Noach actually built a boat and saved the world? Do we believe that? Is that like a fairy tale? Do we actually believe that? Do we believe in Yetzias Mitzrayim? Do we believe in Kriyas Yamsuf? Do we believe in Kabbalah Torah? Do we believe in Mashiach as a real thing? Where the Chafetz Chaim believed in Mashiach as a real thing? Do we believe in Tchias HaMesim? Do we believe that every Jew in Eretz Yisrael, Hashem should avenge their blood, who lost their life, this horrific pogrom? Do we believe that we're going to see them again? Do we believe in that? Is that like fairy tales, or that's a real thing? And if we do believe in those things, which we do, because Rabba Emunah Secha, so what does that create within us in moments like this? What does that ask of us in times like this? Today we read the story of a tzaddik, Tamin. Not a lot of people have that title given to them in the Torah. Very holy person who was selected to save the world, or to save whatever scraps of the world were worth saving. And it was a mabul. It was a mabul milashon bilbul. The whole thing, the whole world was in a terrible state of confusion. But Noach was a tzaddik, and Noach was a Tamin. He was the one who was strong. He was the one who had emunah. And yet Rashi tells us, the Torah tells us, that Noach entered the Teva mipnei mei hamabul. He entered the Teva because of the waters of the Mabul. What's the chiddush in that concept? It says Rashi, a startling thing. Af Noach miktane amona hayil. Noach was also struggling with his emunah, despite everything that was happening, or maybe because of everything that was happening. It says Rashi, he was ma'amin ve'eno ma'amin. He believed and he didn't believe. Sheyavo hamabul. He spent all that time building the boat, and Chazal, Rashi can tell us that Noach didn't believe. But what's even more astounding, what's a big chizuk to me, and I was thinking about it this week, is that a person could be grappling in that world. I'm trying to give us a little permission tonight, because that's part of the Gilu Barada, that's part of the Rabba Emunah Secha, that's part of what it means to be big in confusing times. I'm trying to give us a little bit of permission tonight, that even if we feel at times that we're ma'amin ve'eno ma'amin, not that we don't believe in it conceptually. Of course we believe in Mashiach. But Eino Ma'amin, in the sense, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. Because Noach wasn't exactly sure how the Ma'amin was going to go. He was Ma'amin, the Eino Ma'amin. He believed it, but Until it happened, it was hard for him to understand. And yet, such a person can still be called a tzaddik. It can still be called a tamim. How does a person who's struggling with his emunah still maintain a worthiness to be called a tzaddik and a tamim? But HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, because ma'amim be'eino ma'amim, that's part of our story. As Elokim v'salech Noach needed support. Rashi says, tzarech sa'ad v'samcho. Unlike Abraham, the ultimate pillar of emunah, Noach was struggling. He needed support. He needed chizuk. And there's nothing wrong with that. He's still a tzaddik, and he's still a tamim. Because he understands that there's a complexity to what's taking place in his life. He understands that he's being called upon for something which is entirely overwhelming. And that's okay. He's ma'amin be'eino ma'amin. He's still a tzaddik, he's still a tamim. Some of us are learning Shabbos morning, the Sefer Agir Dekala, by the Holy B'nai Yissaschar. His very last piece on Bezos HaBracha. As many Sefer Jewish and Chasidus do, they try to weave together the end of the Torah and the beginning of the Torah. The Le'inei Kol Yisrael that ends the Torah, and the Bereshis Bara Elokim. And he says, what's the secret of the Le'inei Kol Yisrael and the Bereshis Bara Elokim? So we know the first sugya in the Torah, Bereshis Bara Elokim, we translate it properly the way Rashi translates it. It's not that in the beginning Hashem created, but rather as part of this process of creation of Shemayim V'aretz, Hashem began with Or and Choshech. Says the B'nai Yissaschar in his writings on Chumash, he says, Le'inei Kol Yisrael Bereshis Bara. That sugya of being Mavar Or from Choshech, that ability to distinguish, we just said in Havdalah tonight, Amavdim and Kodesh L'chol, to be able to distinguish between Or and Choshech, Bein Yisrael La'amim, that responsibility falls squarely on our shoulders. And the B'nai Yissaschar says that's the Le'inei Kol Yisrael before all of our eyes is the responsibility, is the obligation, the holy task, and the privilege of being Mavar, to be Mavdil, Bein Or L'choshech, the way that Hashem began. Vayomer Elokim Yihi Or, and Hashem was Mavdil, Bein Or and Choshech. He even adds a remez, he says, Yisrael, the gematria of our very name, Yisrael, 541 is gematria Or V'choshech. Because that's the story of our lives. The highs and the lows, but somehow being able to live in a world of Or V'choshech and to be those lamplighters, those people who have the power to try to carry all of those feelings inside of ourselves. That's the depth of Rabbi Munasechel, the Jewish life. Maran Eruvin tells us, Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, Shtei Shanim Umechsa Nechleku Beis Shammai Beis. For 2.5 years, that's a long time to stay on one topic. For 2.5 years, the yeshivas of Shammai and Hillel debated the following topic. Halalu Omrim, one group said, Noach lo la'adam shelo nivra yosef yishnev. Life's too complicated, the Or and the Choshech, it's too confusing. It would be better not to even exist. But Halalu Omrim, and the other one said, and it doesn't say, by the way, everyone thinks, Beis Shammai is probably the one who's maybe a little more pessimistic, Beis Hillel is a little more optimistic, it doesn't say. The Halalu Omrim, and another group, another yeshiva said, Noach lo la'adam shenivra yosef mishelo nivra. It's better to exist than not to exist. And after 2.5 years of presentations, of debates, Nimdu v'gamru, says the Gemara, they finally put it to a vote, and they decided, Noach lo la'adam shelo nivra yosef mishelo. That it would be better not to exist than to exist at all. Which raises 1,000,001 kashas. Hashem made us. Hashem made the world. How do you vote against their one Hashem? There are many teruts to that question. And now the Gemara says, "An achshav shenivra." Now that we exist, we should get together. We should make cheshbon nefesh. We should think about the purpose of our life. It'd be better if we weren't here, but now that we're here, we might as well make the most of it. Yemashvesh v'maisav, yifashvesh v'maisav. Such a strange Gemara. It's a tzaddikim of Ishbitz, the Hasidic world of Ishbitz, said, read the Gemara carefully. It didn't say that it's better. And no one can debate if it's better to exist. Of course it's better to exist. Like Kadosh Baruch Hu looked at his world and he said, it's Tov Ma'od. Hashem stopped each day of creation more or less, and Kadosh Baruch Hu took a step back and said, it's good. The world is good. But they debated, is it Noach? Is it comfortable to exist? And they concluded it's not comfortable to exist. Being a Yid is not always comfortable. Being a Jew in this world is not always comfortable. I went to Costco this week in New Jersey, and nothing happened. and yet I still felt like everyone was looking at me. I felt like I was being judged. And maybe it's my own lack of homework. Maybe it's in my own head. And maybe it's nothing. Or maybe Klal Yisrael is on center stage right now. And it's not Noach, it's not comfortable. Noach shalom nivra, it'd be more comfortable not to have the responsibility of being V'arer bin Or v'choshech. It would be easier to not exist. But Kadosh Baruch Hu says, but I implanted within you Rabba Munasecha, I gave you great amour. I gave you great faith. I gave you the ability to navigate these really hard times. And it's complicated. And you can be a mammon and an eno mammon at the same time, and still be a tzaddik and still be a tam. One of my favorite insights in TEHILLIM, Kapitel Chafei. David HaMelech says about moments like this, about his own pain. Saros levavi hirchivu mimutzukosai hotziyeh. David HaMelech cries out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as he does almost every page of every word of them. Saros levavi hirchivu. The sorrows of my heart are so expansive that I feel like I can't go on. Mimutzukosai hotziyeh. Free me from my captivity. Set me free. Get me out of this. David HaMelech cries out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch has a different shot, and I've shared it with some of you in the past. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says, and I think it's what we're seeing in our times right now. Rav Hirsch says, put the comma after the first. Saros, comma. When Klal Yisrael faced Saros, what are the next two words? Levavi hirchiv. It expands our heart. It expands our mind. It expands our consciousness. All of a sudden, I have more space for Ivdu Hashem b'simcha and Ivdu Hashem b'yira. Yes, those are both psukim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Gilu b'ra'ada." All of a sudden, we find a way to just get bigger. Or like Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim, Kasher Yanu Oso Kain Yirbe V'Chein. The more they tried to break us, they saw that the spirit of Klal Yisrael is indestructible. And we get bigger, and we do more, and we daven more, and we do more chesed, and we give more tzedakah. We make more phone calls to check on people. And we learn more, like we're doing tonight. And it's an incredible thing to see sorrows, when we face sorrows, levavi hirchivu. And yet at the same time, David HaMelech says, and despite the greatness that comes from the struggle, mimutzukosai hotziyeh. Kadosh Baruch Hu, take us out of this. Take me out of this mess. Because as much as, yes, on the one hand, I have the strength to do this, and I've been assigned this task, but Rabbono Shalom, this is not what I want. I want to see safety, I want to see security, I want to see simcha. I want to see the messianic vision of the Nevi'im, of Od Yeshu Zakenu Zakenos, to have older people sitting in Yerushalayim, a Bubby and a Zaidi sitting in Yerushalayim, drinking a cup of coffee at a corner cafe without being afraid that someone's going to attack. That's the messianic vision. Children playing in the street. Like that's the big reveal at the end. But in a certain sense, yeah, halabai. Halabai, we should be able to have that degree of protection, of security. And yet at the same time, Kadosh Baruch Hu is putting us to this test. Sorrows, we're stepping up. Rabba Emunah Secha. Our Emunah becomes even bigger and more expansive. Chazal say that Noach saw three worlds. Noach was in a world before the Mabul. Noach went through that period of time that he was in the Teva, and then Noach came back to it. And it was hard for Noach to imagine that after everything he had gone through, that there's going to be a possibility of rebuilding. And a little bit we feel that at times. We feel, how are we going to bring us into that final chapter? And yet, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Noach, I want to give you chesed. I'll wrap up in just 2 minutes. He says to Noach, Noach, you've been through a lot. Noach comes out of the table, he's struggling. Noach comes out of the table, the tzaddik comes out of the table, he plants a vineyard, he's drinking, he's overwhelmed by his sorrows. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to him, Noach, look a little deeper. There's another chapter to be written. There was the world before the Mabul, there was the world during the Mabul, but there's going to be a world after the Mabul also. After everything you went through, after all that you saw at that little window of the table, there's going to be a world after the Mabul. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Noach, V'haya ba'anani anan ala haaretz v'nir asa ha'keshes b'nam. Noach, I want to teach you how to have optimism in difficult times. And he says to Noach, I want to show you that what? That when I display my cloud in the world, there's going to be a rainbow in the cloud. want to share with you what Rav Shechter writes, Mipnei HaRav, in the name of Rav Soloveitchik, Zecher Tzadik L'Vracha, a beautiful drasha. Rav Soloveitchik said, he quotes Rashi in Noach Mikat Ne'eman. Noach had a lack of emunah. And Noach, Vayachel, Noach Ish Ha'adama, like the Gemara says, like Chazal say, Sh'asas Atzmo Chulin. Noach debased himself after he was so broken. Listen to the words. Rav Shechter recording the words of Rav Soloveitchik. V'achisaron hayashalo ra efsharut shal tov eitzel kol rishei dora. Noach didn't know how to see the Rishonim. He didn't know how to look at the world that was falling apart and think that maybe I have the ability to do something about it. B'nigud la'Avram sheispal ba'ad Sodom. As opposed to Avram, when he saw Sodom, and Avram says, Hashem, maybe we can work this out. It was a different set of eyes, it was a different perspective. HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed to Noach a rainbow, not in a clear sky, but a rainbow that comes out of a dark cloud. Even if it looks like there's a neshama that you can't squeeze any light. All of a sudden, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Look at that cloud. Look at that dark cloud." You would think that there's nothing illuminated that's going to come from there. Ein adam. Ki b'chol anan efshar liros mashu or. Rav Soloveitchik said, because in every dark cloud, in every dark moment of our history, it's always the birth of a bit of or. The efshar liros afilu keshes malei shaloms. And maybe you'll not just see a bit of or, but maybe we'll see the light of Geulah. Maybe we'll see the ultimate light. Maybe we'll see the full spectrum of it. And Hashem says to Noach, Noach, you need to understand. You didn't understand the depth of a heart. Saros, kama, levavi yirchiu. Rabba amuna sech. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I want you to remember that. Next time you face darkness, look for those rays of light. Look for those Jews who are lighting candles for the first time. Look for those Jews who are keeping Shabbos for the first time. Look for those Jews who are putting a mezuzah on their army base, but there wasn't one somehow for too long. Look at those Jews who are tying tzitzis and wearing tzitzis and sending money and packing boxes. Look for all those sparks of light against that darkness that Klal Yisrael has experienced in these last couple of weeks. And don't ever forget that. I want to just end with a story, a sign with a story. There's a doctor, Dr. Moshe Tzvi. Some of you know who that is. He's a cardiopulmonologist, Maimonides Medical Center in Brooklyn. He said one time an alter yid walked into his office for an appointment. And he sees this older Jew. He has numbers on his arm. And he says to him, survivor. He said, can I ask? I fell out of job. How did you survive? He says, how did I survive? I'll tell you how I survived. Ata miglesa ba'anan kodach. That's the line that begins Shofros, Musaf Rosh Hashanah. So Dr. Kirstein said to me, I don't know what you mean. Ata miglesa ba'anan kodecha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed in your cloud of glory, you revealed yourself to Klal Yisrael. What does that mean? So he said, I was in the camps, and he said, I first arrived in the concentration camp. I don't know exactly where he was in Helm. And he said, my father was a chazan, and I was used to the tefillos, the Yom Noram. And I realized it's right around the corner, and obviously we didn't have a machzor, we didn't have anything. And I wanted to try to put together whatever I can remember from the tefillos, from hearing my father all those years singing the tefillos, preparing for the Yom Noram. So he said I was able somehow to get a scrap of paper and something to write with. And he said every night I would go late at night, I would try to sit near the crack by the window, by the light of the moon, and I would try to just, whatever I remember about that, I would try to write it down, I would try to record it. He said one night an SS guard called me. He spotted me through the window. He comes bursting into the barracks and he says to me, Jew, what are you up to? And I said to myself, if I'm about to die al Kiddush Hashem, I might as well go down in a courageous way. And I turned to the Nazi guard and I said, what am I up to? I'll tell you what I'm up to. I'm up to Atan the Gleisa Ba'anan Kodesh. That's what he was writing it. The Nazi grabbed the papers out of his hand. And he says, what is this? At that point, he was nervous. And he said, you have beautiful handwriting. He said, you have beautiful handwriting. He said, I was recently appointed, his guard says to him, this official says, he said, I just received orders just the other day, a new position. I was given an upgrade. I just received a promotion. And I need someone to do my paperwork. I need someone to be my scribe. And you have beautiful handwriting. You're going to work for me. And he said it saved his life. He said it put him into a different group. He said all the people in that original group, they lost their lives. Hashem should avenge their blood. He said, but Ata Miglesa Banan Kodecha saved my life. The dark cloud with the rainbow inside of it saved my life. And I think that's what we have to feel during these days. To remember that Kabbalah Torah also took place in the dark cloud. And that sometimes, against the darkest backdrop, most painful moments of Jewish history, the most beautiful, exalted Gula emerges. We have to take chizuk. Rabba Munasecha, the incredible Amud of Israel. So I bless us and B'rtz Hashem, Kadosh Baruch Hu should help us. Again, it's not an easy sugya. Noach lo la'adam shelo nivra. It would be easier not to exist. But tov that Hashem made us easier. Tov that Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us that Amunah. Tov that Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us the strength of each other to support each other. And that even in those moments of Mamin, Me'eno Mamin, Ba'amech Kulam Tzadikim, like Noach and Tzaddik. But B'rtz Hashem, we should continue to express that Amunah, that love for each other. And Halavai will be Zocha very soon to see the Gula Shlem of Meir Ben. Amen.
Thank you, RECITATION. Join our Rav and RECITATION Weinberg in thanking, expressing our communal encouragement to our sponsors and to the Delta community particularly this evening, particularly to Dr. Michael Wiedeker, who really spearheaded the vision and the details of tonight. Rav mentioned before that Baruch Hashem, all of our speakers are Talmidei Chachamim who need no introduction to our TEHILLIM. RaV Willig has been mashpia on so many of us in so many different ways, in so many different contexts. In New York City and beyond. I myself personally have so many memories in public context and in private conversations, particularly where RaV Willig's emunah in Yeshuas Hashem in uncertain times was expressed in many different contexts with clarity and with strength. RaV Willig joins us this evening. Told me earlier this week in Shiva, he's coming to give a shir, and a shir that's of the moment. An opportunity to learn Torah from RaV Willig and to look at present events through his eyes, as he joins us this evening to think about managing how we manage one of the many, we could say, collateral complexities of the situation of the Matzav that Klal Yisrael finds itself in, and how one navigates parents on one side of the Atlantic and children on the other side of the Atlantic. There's a lot to say about that from a chinuch perspective, and from a growth perspective, and from the perspective of the halachas of Kibra B'Ein. And without further ado, we have the privilege, the pleasure of hearing from RaV Willig.
Thank you very much. Before I begin the shir, I was asked to come, and I was told it was a Leil Iyun, people coming together from the entire community. I said to myself, how can I say no to an opportunity to join this wonderful kehillah, coming together as one to learn Torah? Two things are accomplished. Coming together, which I believe is the tzav hasha'ah, is the command of this time to come together as much as possible. And number two, to increase our limud HaTorah. We all know about the importance of increasing our tefillah. This is well known. A little known line in the Ramban, in Sefer Mitzvahs that say, hey, you point out there's a mitzvah to daven be'ez tzara, and he quotes the pasuk, Ki savo milchama be'artzach al atzar atzores, and so relevant to our situation presently. It tells us that the Rambam held as a mitzvah to daven every single day, based on la'avda b'chol avavcha. And yes, as Sifri says, this is both tefillah and Talmud and learning. The Ramban writes, this is asmachta. It's only rabbinic. It's not really a Torah responsibility. But in the Eis Tzara, it's all a mitzvah in a Torah. And therefore, the mitzvah in a Torah, the Eis Tzara is not only to daven more, but also to learn more. People come together on the Motzai Shabbos, men and women, to study Torah. This is the commandment of our epoch, of our time, this Eis Tzara. As I pointed out, women are exempt from Talmud Torah as a general principle. But this mitzvah of U'avda b'chol avavchem, the Eis Tzara of Limud Torah, is gender blind. It's part of a war effort. A war effort. Chazal told us that Elef Lamata, with 12,000 soldiers on the front, another 12,000 in the back lines, and then designated daveners, another 12,000 people, just to daven for the army. And we have to daven, we have to learn for the safety of our embattled soldiers and all the Klal Yisrael. As we heard from the Weinberg shlita, they're all enmeshed in a very difficult situation. They're unable to be fulfilling the words of the prophets. Playing without worrying about running to the nearest mamad. A lot of trauma in Eretz Yisrael. A lot of trauma. So our shir today, with the request of Rav Neuburger shlita, to talk a little bit. Time does not allow for a full elaboration on the topic of whether there is, in fact, a mitzvah of kibbud av v'eim, if a parent tells a child, please come back, or please don't go. Is there any precedent in the Talmud itself? The font of all of our wisdom. Talmud Bavli. There's one story in the Sechta Kiddushin, Daf Lamed Aleph and Beis, which sheds light on this complex issue. The story goes as follows: the man named Rav Asi, or Namaroy, and an elderly mother. And the mother apparently became somewhat senile. I'm skipping over the details just to save time. And so he left her. The Rambam tells us, apparently according to this Gemara, that you should put your parent into capable hands and leave, because you can't do a good job. In all those situations where you need the dignity of the parent, that the child take care of their needs. A reference to Parshas Hashavua with Chum. There's a certain dignity which a child has to give to a parent. You can't take care of the parent the way an aide can. This woman was a feisty woman. Presumably she eluded the caretaker and decided to kind of run after him to Eretz Yisrael where he went. He knows which feisty women. Baruch Hashem. So now he goes to Rabbi Yochanan and he asks him, "Can I leave Eretz Yisrael?" He said, "No. Likras imamam." Towards my mother. An amazing answer, Rabbi Yochanan. Eini yodeh. I don't know. Now I always say I don't know, but this is Rabbi Yochanan. He doesn't know. Who does know? Itra Pruta. He waited a little bit. He went back again. Asked the second time. I see. This right say so. Let's say you want to leave. Amakim B'Azir Chol Go, good to hate, and come back in peace. A few lines later, on this Kedushin Lamed Aleph with base. A few lines later, he hears that Aronaba, that her coffin, she passed away along the way. He has 4 words. Iyadi lo nafki. If I would have known, I would not have left. What does that mean? The Mashal asks, I mean, he wouldn't have left. The Gemara says, right there in Kiddushin, B'chabdo b'chayev b'chabdo b'moso. An obligation to keep it up aim, even after the parent has passed away. Wouldn't it be proper covet to greet the Levaya, the Oren of the mother, as it's being brought towards Eretz Yisrael? That's the Marshal's question. So there are a number of ways out before I get to my main point. One way out is to say, as the Marshal suggests, that Mechabda Bavoso, the Gemara limits to a case of saying about a parent, Hareni Kaparas Mishkava, for the first 12 months. What does that mean? Whatever the parent should have endured, I take on myself. How does that work? So I give a mushal. They say that it's a Gehenim up there, it's hot. So imagine that a parent tells a child on a hot day, please put on the air conditioner. Let's keep it up, eh? So somehow, if the child takes it upon himself, Kaparas Mishkava, put on the air conditioner up there, that's Kibam de Mimosa. But anything else short of that is not considered Kibam de Mimosa. The Rav Shah says it's in effect the Tosfos on the side says the same thing. That's one way out. That's a simple shot. There's another shot. The Ravid criticizes the Rambam. How can you leave your parent? Someone else can take better care of your parent? We know the answer to that question is yes, but the Ravid couldn't imagine it. It's the Rashash against the Ravid. Ram's quoting Gemara. Rav Asi left his mother when she was Sirah. What do you want from the Rambam? Says the Rashash. You know what it might mean? The Yadin lo nafki means not the simple interpretation that had I known that my mother had died, I would not have left Eretz Yisrael to greet her Ora. Had I known my mother was going to die, I would never have left her in the first place. You know why? You can't trust anybody else. That's the Rashash's suggestion. And it helps other questions of the Ran, not for that. This is all on the side. This is not halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa we paskin is a chiyuv of kibbutz, but even after death, which is not limited as the Marshal said. And we paskin that a person has a right to leave a parent an obligation, even if it's not beneath the dignity of you should take care of them in certain ways when they're not dressed, etc. Okay. We're back to the original question. Why would Rav Asi leave Eretz Yisrael if his mother was alive, but not leave Eretz Yisrael if he knew that his mother had passed away? That's the question. Everyone understand the question? That is the question for tonight. So the answer would be as follows. The Rambam says that a person is required to honor a parent, even if the parent is, we'll use a harsh word, a Russia, a wicked person, a person who's not a good standing. And the Torah asks the questions against the Gemara. The Gemara gives the case of a person who stole or lent money with ribbis. The person died. So the son is supposed to give back the money. Asks the Gemara why. He's Eina Osa Masa Amcha. The father was a thief, a ganav. And therefore the son has no obligation to repay the debt. So the Gemara answers, he did tshuva. He did tshuva, he should give the money back. Didn't have a chance. You see from that Gemara explicitly, if the person is Eina Osa Masa Amcha, never did tshuva, that there's no obligation on the son to repay the father's debt. You see, there is no mitzvah to honor a parent who was not a good standing. That's the question. And it leaves that question as a question. To answer that question, the Mefarshim with the following explanation. The Minchas Chinuch has a famous discussion in Kiyurav, is it a Beinon Lamakom or Beinon Lachavero? The first glance is Beinon Lachavero, it's a child and a parent. Yet, we know the Ramban points out, so the first half of the Dibros. So what is it? So the answer is it's both. It's both. Why is it both? Let's explain. The Sefer HaChinuch says that honoring a parent is paying back a debt. The biggest debt in the world To any person is to a father and mother brought you into this world. As we heard, it's good to be in the world. Not be easy, but it's good to be in the world. And your parents brought you into this world. No greater debt can be imagined. That's one prong. But the Gemara also tells us in Kiddush, same davening, Lamed Lamed Aleph, Shlosha Shutfim B'Adam. The three partners, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ava v'Imo. When a person honors his father and mother, it's Kivduni. You're honoring Hashem. Both are there. And therefore, if a person is privileged to have a parent who's righteous and alive with us, he fulfills a double mitzvah whenever he honors father and mother. However, there is a consideration which can eliminate either one of these two prongs. But individuals, Eno Samas Amcha, we'll use the word Russia as the Torah uses. Hashem doesn't take him in as a partner. If you're in business, you want a partner, you make sure he's not a Russian. It's still your money. Hashem is not looking for partnerships with people who are doing bad things. So therefore, the prong of an Adam Lamoko is forfeit in the situation of an individual who is not Osei Masa'am. When a person passes on, Maram Sheikh says it's based on an Abarbanel a little bit. Benam Lachaver is to some extent a social contract. I help you, you help me. Biglal Adavar Azeh. Wheel of fortune goes around and around. Once a person passes on, that prong no longer exists. Take care of the dead is called Chesed Shel Emes. It's not a regular act of Chesed in the normal sense of the word. So now, we'll do a little bit of math. Person who has a parent who's a tzaddik, who's alive, should all be spoken to that. It's a double mitzvah. Kibbud Avei. Minam Lamakom and Minam Lachaver. The person is not a righteous individual, but he's alive. There still exists a mitzvah of Priyas Chov. If you borrow money from somebody, it turns out he's a very evil person. You say, I'm not going to pay you back. Don't pay the pass for that way. You have to pay back. You have a debt. So your father's not such a good guy. You have a debt. He brought you into this world. So therefore, the Rambam says the mitzvah kibbud out does apply. Chavdem Motzai is no longer alive. There's no longer Benam Lachaver, but Benam Lamachom. He was a loyal partner in his life to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What if he had two strikes? Number one, he's not alive, and number two, he's in Russia. It didn't do tshuva. So neither prong exists. Neither prong exists. No Benam Lamachom because he was in Russia. No Benam Lachaver is no longer alive. So the Gemara that says that there's no obligation of kibbud out for someone who's a ganev is after he died. When he's alive, there is an obligation. Ad kan, the answer which is given to the opinion of the rabbi. Let's now take this and apply it to our Gemara. The issue I'm raising is not new. To Pischei Tshuva refers to it in Even HaEzer. Rav Aryeh has no less than 2 tshuvas about it in Chavadas. And he said, you know, there are very few reasons for which a person can leave Eretz Yisrael. Very few. To learn Torah, to get married, for Parnasa. Kibbud Av is not one of those which is listed in that list. And therefore he says it's not listed in the list. You can't leave. It's not in the list. To deflect this, one can give the following story. Make up a story. Okay? A person lives here somewhere in this community, and he wants to go into a business. He lacks the capital, to get started. I think they say the first $1 million is the hardest, as they say. He goes to a good friend, he borrows $1 million to go into a business. Fine? Just imagine what happens today. Next Sunday, week from today, on the sign in his house, it says, for sale. For sale? What's for sale? It's the creditor, what is for sale? And weren't you in shul yesterday? Sure. The rabbi gave a fiery sermon. Lech l'chol me'atzchol. Go to Eretz, give a fiery sermon encouraging Aliyah. So of course, I understand the rabbi. Well, Aliyah, you owe me $1 million. You can't pay me back if you're in Eretz Yisrael. You can't do business there. But the rabbi said I have to go. Let's go to the rabbi. Go to the rabbi. One guy said, Rabbi, I want to follow you. He said, yes, say chill. One guy said, you owe me $1 million. I'd be the rabbi, I'd say, first pay back the $1 million and then go on out here. I don't pass him this shit. You owe a debt of gratitude to your father, to your mother. If they need you, you have to take care of them first. But it's not on the list. It's not on the list. It's only learning Torah and then Parnasa and a Shidduch. It doesn't have to be in the list. That's the list of Ben Adam L'Makom. This is Ben Adam L'Chavero. That's my rebuttal to Rav Avadia's psak. That's why I understand this Gemara as well. Rav Asi was taking care of his mother. When he saw that her senility prevented him from doing so, he left her. He thought it capable hands and went to Eretz Yisrael. And she eludes the protection. Is on the way in the middle of the desert somewhere. He goes back. Comes to Rav Yochanan. I don't know. Well, you don't know. Who else knows? He didn't know why Rav Asi wanted to go back. Was it, to give the expression, frumkeit? He wanted to be a good Jew, Beinan L'Makom? It was much more than that. He felt Beinan L'Chavero. He had this interpersonal obligation to go back. She said, I don't know. Came back a little later to ask a second time. I've been in this business for a while. Someone comes back a second time with the same question. Something is pushing him. It's not just, he already asked once. Clearly, to Rav Yochanan's mind, Rav Asi was motivated by the Beinan L'Chavero. He wasn't from Kai. He wanted to take care of his mother. He felt compelled to take care of his mother. So Rav Yochanan said, Asi, this was says to us, he came back a second time. Go. Beinan L'Chavero, paying back a debt, is more important than being in Eretz Yisrael. But what happened? She passed away. She passed away. The interpersonal dimension no longer applies. Iyadi lo nafki. If I would have known that she passed away, I would not have left Eretz Yisrael. Because the Beinan L'Makom, sure it's a cover to go to a funeral. But Beinan L'Makom. Beinan L'Makom does not override Eretz Yisrael except for those three exceptions. This is not one of them. That's my Dvar Torah to explain this Gemara. That's the Dvar Torah for this evening. Brief. There's much more to be said. Brief. I was asked to give a real shir. This is the shir. Now we talk tachlis. It's not the first situation in history where parents wanted the children to stay back in America and the children insisted on going to Eretz Yisrael. Happened in my Rebbe's family. Those who were around knew very well. The Rebbe of Soloveitchik was opposed to his children. Robert Rebbeson, Lichtenstein, leaving him in New York and going to Israel. He was opposed. Tried to convince them, and he failed. They went anyway. You have to assume they did the right thing. Father said no. Father, God will be Yisrael. He wanted to be there as children. Which father will be there as children, especially such children? The big question is, how do you define a need? Rav Asi had need was a Cana. She obviously was in great need. Until she became senile, he took every measure to take care of her personally, not to give it to anyone else. And everyone who's zocha to take care of aging parent is the biggest mitzvah in the world. The biggest mitzvah in the world. As long as you can do it yourself, preserve the dignity of a parent, you should do it. Today there are ways you can have an aide in the house. There are all kinds of ways. But what about psychological need? The parent says, I want you to be near me. I want you near me. Is that a sufficient need to prevent a child from making an aliyah? Maybe Rabbi looked at St. Paskin. No. He wanted an aliyah. I think that is the consensus view. If the parent doesn't need your hands-on attention, just wants you psychologically to be nearby, as Rav Aryeh says, a parent can't tell a child not to keep one of the Torah mitzvahs. It's a mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael. The parent needs you, it's a different story. The parent's health is endangered, it's a different story. Tomorrow I'm supposed to be on a Zoom in a group called Not Going Anywhere. I have the name right. I think Rabbi Leibowitz spoke on this group last week with together Rabbi Shechter Shlita, Rabbi Aryeh Lebowtiz was the third speaker. We'll have number 4. The name gives it away. Not Going Anywhere. So I was called by my good friend Rabbi Tarek and Eretz Yisrael, please speak and tell him your story. He knows my story. I was in Kerem Yavne in 1967. And it's difficult and it's horrific. It's the situations right now based on the past events 2 weeks ago. The scare for the entire broader population of the state of Israel was greater then than now. I'm speaking from someone who was there. I'm speaking as a parent and grandparent and great-grandparent in the Holy Land right now. The scare was greater for a simple reason. You had these humongous armies, all sides of us. The whole Egyptian army, the Syrian army, the Jordanian army. And they all three, in fact, I'll tell you stories. You know the stories very well. There was 3 weeks of unbearable tension. As it happened, my parents visited Eretz Yisrael during those 3 weeks. Remember, my grandfather told me, you should go home with them. I said, Zaidi, you come with them, I'll go with you too. Ich bin schon ein älterer Yid. His late 80s. You're a young man. My father said to me, just don't be a hero. Don't run to the front. Stay in Kerem Yavne and Hashem shall watch over you and all the things. That's my Messiah. In Kerem Yavne, every American boy stayed with one exception. It was a correct exception. That individual's father had a very serious heart condition. I was afraid the father would have a heart attack from the scare. There's another Holocaust. So he had to go away. No question about it. It wasn't psychological. It was cardiac. Everyone else stayed. Another famous yeshiva in the Holy City, where many people left, she was not happy taking them back. How'd you leave us based sorrow? That's how I want to conclude my remarks. In a time like this, what's required of us? Yes, look in the Rambam in Hilchos Tanios, Perek Aleph, Halacha Aleph, was a mitzvah saseh, lizok, based sorrow. Over and above the Rambam's everyday tefillah. Ramban, as I said, agrees with this one, not with the first one. And he explains that by crying out to Hashem in their sorrow, this will be gorim, will cause the sorrow to go away. Because why is it? Why do we have this sorrow? You'll tell me, I know you'll tell me that the Israeli intelligence was poor, and they didn't anticipate they're going to shoot out the cameras, and the French didn't work, and they knew what was going on in Nil Fakir, and they knew what was going on in the Yeshuvim, and they were reading the papers. That's true. On a superficial level, all of that's true. We know all too well the real reason. Ani mamin b'emunah shlema. Shabori yisbarach shema. Hu borei u'manhig. Chol ha'ruah. Hu asa oseh v'yaseh. That's kol ha'maseh. This happened because the Kadosh Baruch Hu decreed it to happen. Why? We don't really know. My Rebbe was always careful not to point fingers at certain sins, at someone else's sins. It's easy to say, Slach lanu avinu ki chatasa. That's very easy. Someone else's heart, very easy. If we have to look for something, as I began, we have to look for achdus. This has already been said by many people greater than me. That when there's achdus, there are no casualties. I spoke about it in my shul this morning. Rashi, Rashi. Rashi says that the Dora Flaga sin was worse than Dora Mabel. They weren't killed. You know why? Because they were together. The Mabel were fighting. That's only part of a medrash. Medrash, that's what that says. Noach says more than that. That when Klal Yisrael is together, even based on Avodah Zarah, no casualties. They're referring to another Chazal. That David Melech Yisrael, the greatest king of all, his soldiers had casualties. It was Achav Melech Yisrael, perhaps the most wicked of all, no casualties. That's so contrary to it. How can it be? Says the Chazal, because in Achav's time there was unity. It was a unity based on Avodah Zarah. Didn't matter. It's a chibur la'atzavim, as the Tanakh calls it. A chibur based on Avodah Zarah. No casualties. David and Melch, there was Diltur, there was infighting, bickering, there were casualties. What we can do now, our war effort, is greater achdus, to come together more as much as possible. Even if people are not our cup of tea. And as I said, it's easy to bang Shechatasa, you know, and the Holy Land is difficult, discord. Talk about civil war, Shem Yirachah. In Eretz Yisrael, the disagreements between the secular and religious are very great because they occupy the same space. There's no disagreements between the people in this shul and the unaffiliated Jews down the block. We don't occupy the same space, no problem. But what about within our own communities? There's sadly so much discord within Shomrei Torah mitzvahs of different groups, and sadly between groups. And even within groups, when they split in not a proper fashion. That's what we can do. That's what we can do. But there's one more Rambam. That's the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, Perek Gimel. He tells us, "Haporesh midarkei tzibur," someone who splits himself away from the ways of the community at large. Ve'eino nichlas etzorasam. When they're in crisis, he disregards it. It's not my problem. He didn't do a single aver in his whole life. Ein lo chelek le'olam haba. Start. Talk about various cardinal sins which forfeit your olam haba. He didn't do a single under them. Not one sin. The answer is very simple. He didn't forfeit his share in the world to come. Never had a share. Kol Yisrael yesh them chelek olam haba. If you're part of the Klal Yisrael, you have a share. If you're not nichnas et tzarosam, you have no share to begin with. And that is what is so laudable about tonight's program. And coming together with Achdus, learning on the Motzai Shabbos together, Torah Hashem, davening to a greater intensity, Tshuva, Tefillah, Tzedakah, Mamiras, Roach, Zera, giving outsized donations to help the situation there, so each one in his own way. Davening and learning, as I said earlier, men and women are equally obligated in this crisis time. Says the Rambam, if we will call out to Hashem. This is going. This causes the sorrow to go away. We learned the lesson. We got the message. You'll say it's mikra nikris. You know, they shot out the cameras and they put the fence. And it's just a coincidence of a military lapse, an intelligence lapse. Chas v'shalom, says the Rambam. You make things worse. Goes from Kerry to Hamas Kerry, writes the Rambam. The very beginning of Hilchos Tanis. We dare not do that. So it's in our hands, not just you and me, all of Klal Yisrael, to determine what comes next. We have no idea what comes next. No possible dome. Only Hashem knows what comes next. But one thing we do know, if we will respond properly, that is our share. That's the elef lamata of those who are davening, those who are learning, those who are doing acts of chesed, increasing actos of Klal Yisrael, that will help this situation to be resolved. Avinu Malkeinu, Hatzmach, Lonu, Yeshua, Bekarov, Amen. Amen.
Thank you so much, HaRav Willig. A very different type of context. It's a couple of years ago. And what was supposed to be a purely technical part of the last Chag HaSmicha that we celebrated Yeshiva, Rav Lebowtiz managed to grab the moment to impart a very significant message to the young Musmachim and to impart it with an incredible smile. And in calling up, presenting the Musmachim, he turned to them and said, remember, even as you become Rabbeim to your Talmidim, to remain Talmidim to your Rabbeim. And I thought that moment captured a lot, and it particularly captured the two of the aspects of Mos Hashem that Rav Lebowtiz models for us in general, and that speak to us with particular poignancy right now. One is the sense of hallowing the Masorah of our Rebbeim, and recognizing that no matter where we are in life, our Masorah has so much more to teach us than we have yet realized. And the other is, as we, so many of us have been thinking about for the last 2 weeks, as the Rav said earlier, Kadosh Baruch Hu decided to continue this year the Yom Noraim season, the Yom Noraim mode, the Yom where you would think it would end on the calendar. Chedvas Hashem hi ma'uzchem. And awareness, as we discussed last night, that we draw great strength. As Ezra reminded us on Rosh Hashanah 2,500 years ago, that even in difficult times in particular, and Yimei Hadin in particular, we draw great strength from the joy, the thoughtful joy that we gain from our Kadosh Baruch, from our relation with our Kadosh Baruch Hu, the joy that we have with our Kadosh Baruch Hu even in difficult times, and particularly the chedva of learning. And it is those two elements, the Masorah, a sense of Masorah, a sense of connectedness, and the joy that we take from coming together to reach our Kadosh Baruch Hu through learning. It's a pleasure and a privilege to cap off this evening with words of Torah Chedvas Hashem or our needs.
Sorry, Rav Willig shlita, Neuburger shlita, Ekon shlita. So tonight's been a little bit of a scary night for me in a different way. I was in West Hempstead earlier this evening, and they told me that they asked me to say a Torah, and they told me you'll speak, and then someone else will speak after you. And I walk in, and Rav Shechter is doing the Q&A over there. And I say, "Oh, we'll cut Rav Shechter short, and then you should speak in front of Rav Shechter." Yeah, you have to leave. He's going to stay. He's going to stick around for a while. So I had to speak in front of Rav Shechter, and then I come here and I have to speak in front of Rav Willig. This is like my worst nightmare, but it's also It's also the greatest dream. So I got to hear of Schechter for a little bit, but I got to hear of Willig, Baruch Hashem. I have to say, I'm very moved by how many people are coming out on Motzai Shabbos. Where typically we do all sorts of activities on Motzai Shabbos and coming out together to learn and to feel together, to experience together a little bit of what Klal Yisrael is going through. I really want to share with you just one idea, one Torah thought that I think carries with it two very significant messages. And I think both messages are very relevant for the time that we're living through right now. The Torah tells us that Noach was an Ish Tzaddik. And then the Torah tells us that he was a Tamim Bidorosav, in his generations, in the plural. It's a little bit of a funny word to use. Normally when we describe someone as a Gadol, we'll say that he's a Gadol HaDor. We rarely refer to someone who's a Gadol of Doros, of generations. And yet Noach is described as this person who is Bidorosav. So the Sforno picks up on this and he suggests, well, he saw Mesushala, Mama. So he was able to experience multiple generations. He saw his father and his grandfather, and he had a connection with them. So he lived through many generations, which is, wonderful, but it's also true of Baruch Hashem, many of us. That we have, Will just mentioned his own relationship with his grandfather. We've been able to have relationships like this. So are we all B'dor Nasa? Are we all in multiple generations? My friend Rav Moshe Tzvi Weinberg suggested perhaps a different mahalech, which is probably the Pashut Pshat. And that is that Noach didn't just live a long and very eventful life. He did that too. But he lived a life that actually spanned two entirely different worlds, two entirely different realities. He saw a world before the Mabul, and he saw a world after the Mabul. And the two were not the same at all. They didn't look similar to each other in any which way. And in that sense, he lived in more than one type of generation. He lived in two realities. The Medrash actually says this explicitly, but not picking up on the word B'dorosav, instead picking up on the word Haya. The Medrash says that Tamim Haya B'dorosav, Rabbi Leil Iyun, Kol Mi Shenemar Bo Haya, Ra'a Olam Chadash. Anyone about whom it says Haya saw an entirely new world. And the Medrash goes on in detail how every stone that Noach saw prior to the Mabul, he also saw it disintegrate during the Mabul, and it wasn't there anymore. The entire earth as he knew it was gone. It had entirely changed. And he saw a new generation. And then the Medrash makes an interesting connection. It says, Noach wasn't the only one that experienced this. It's anyone about whom it says Haya. And the Medrash says that during the time of Churban, between Bayis Rishon and Bayis Sheni, and particularly at the time of the beginning of Bayis Sheni, there was a similar experience. 70 years after Churban Bayis Rishon, some people returned, not nearly enough, but some people returned for Bayis Sheni. Some came a little earlier, some came a little later. A lot of people think that Ezra rebuilt the second base of the Mikdash. Not true. Ezra came after it was already rebuilt. He was busy learning by his Rebbe, Baruch ben Neriah, who was unable to travel. So he had a reason to stay in Chutz La'aretz a little longer. Because the Gemara derives from Ezra's story that Gadol Talmud Torah, Yosef had been in Beis HaMikdash. But eventually, as soon as the time came that he was able to go, Ezra went. Because if you're able to go, then you have to go. So Ezra went to see what Bayis Sheni was going to be like, and he brought up, for those who like Daf Yomi coincidences, Asara Yuchsim Olami Babel, today's Daf Yomi. Ezra brought all types of people. A lot of people that were not in the higher echelons of society. And they come, and the Psukim in the third parak of Ezra describe the reaction of different people to seeing Bayis Sheni. And the pasuk describes, I'll read you just a few passages. Vayanu b'halel uvahodos la'Hashem ki tov ki li'olam chazdom al Yisrael v'chala am heriu trua gedola b'halel Hashem al husad beis Hashem. The entire nation was engaged in halal v'avodah HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the Beis Hashem was reestablished. The entire nation, sounds like without exception. And then the very next pasuk. V'rabim me'hakohanim v'halavim v'rashei ha'avos hazekanim asher ra'u es habayis harishon v'yastu zeh habayis ve'eineihem bochim b'kol gadol. Many of the elderly people who had seen the bayis rishon, when they saw the bayis sheni, they started to cry. They said, "This is what you call a Beis HaMikdash." We saw the level of Ashras HaShechina in Bayis Rishon. This doesn't match up. It's not the same. And they started to cry. Even as people were celebrating and rejoicing, the elders were crying in distress over how much of a downgrade this was, because they saw two worlds. They saw a world of Bayis Rishon, and they saw an Olam Chadash, a world of Bayis Sheni. I think from this little medrash, this little idea, we can derive two critical messages for our time. First, the pasuk had said that Kol Ha'am, everyone was rejoicing, everyone was in Halal V'Hoda'ah. And then the very next pasuk says, and a good number of them were crying. Well, which was it? Were they crying or were they rejoicing? And the obvious answer is both. Because a human being has the capacity to cry and to rejoice. A human being has the capacity to feel a variety of emotions all at one time. I've spoken to a lot of people over the past couple of weeks, and everyone handles things in their own way, and certainly no judgment. But some people just can't handle any negativity. The thoughts just frighten them too much. So they're spending the whole day just watching, living l'chaim videos of Breslovers dancing with Chayalim, on a loop, because that's what it's exciting. That's what Chabadniks dancing with Chayalim, whatever. And nice things, and Charedim cooking for people who are displaced, all these wonderful things. Only the positive. So they can't handle any negativity. And some people can't get out of the negativity. They can't speak to their wives, they can't speak to their children, they haven't worked in 2 weeks. They can't go to a chasana. They can only experience a single dimension. And what these zechuyos teach us is that you can cry, but at the same time, part of our avoda is to experience the full range of emotions simultaneously. Rav Neuburger shlita spoke at a chasana. So only time I ever heard a speech at a chuppah before the chuppah, other than please silence your cell phones. And Rav Neuburger said at the chasana, right before the chuppah, essentially the same idea, that if you're going to be misameach chasam v'kala, weddings have to go on. That's how we rebuild the base. And it was misameach chasam v'kala is kilu bana achas michurvus Yerushalayim. We cancel chag hasmicha. We don't cancel weddings. By the way, canceling Chag HaSmicha doesn't mean we're canceling Smicha. A lot of people ask me, you're going to pull Rebbeim out of the classroom, pull the rabbis out of the classroom. We're not ripping up anyone's cloud. We're not, just the Chag HaSmicha. We postpone that case. The person has to have the complexity, the appreciation of the complexity, to celebrate with a full heart, and at the same time, to feel pride in what Klal Yisrael is, and what Klal Yisrael is doing, and how Klal Yisrael is reacting. It's okay to feel pride. It's a good feeling. Lean into that feeling. When you see how many, as Rav referred to before, hundreds of millions of dollars literally have poured out of world Jewry into Eretz Yisrael, we can be proud of that. When we speak to our friends and relatives in Eretz Yisrael and we ask how you're doing, and we hear about the heroic efforts of Achenu B'nai Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael. I reached out to someone I know from Beit Shemesh just last week. Hey, just wanted to check in. I'm sure we're all doing this. If we're not, we should. Every single day, take another couple of people that you know in Eretz Yisrael and just reach out, thinking about you. I can't think of anything else. How you doing? And this guy, young family, has a bunch of little kids. He says, we're doing as best as can be. We have a family of 10 from the south that moved in with us. We have nothing in common with them, but it's amazing. Now, we've been to Beit Shemesh. They don't make mansions, I don't think. A family of 10 moved in with them. We could be proud. We could be extremely proud of that. And at the same time, we could be extremely sad. We can be extremely frightened. And we can be extremely frightened of what's to come. I don't even mean in the military sense and in the sense of, Rahman al-Islam, the things that become statistics. I'm talking about things that don't become statistics. I reached out to a young man who grew up in our shul. His family made Aliyah when he was in 9th grade, right after his 9th grade year. Why did his family make Aliyah? His mother was driving carpool to DRS one day, and there was some news station on, and it was reporting on the election, whichever election it was. And the mother just made a comment, something along the lines of, this country is crazy. So the 9th grader said, so why are we here? Let's go to Eretz Yisrael. So she said, really? He said, really? So they went. They made Aliyah that summer. This guy, this kid, he was the most athletic and he was bright and leadership qualities like you wouldn't believe. But what do when you make Aliyah and you have those kinds of qualities? You join an elite union. And he joined an elite union. And he spent last Sunday and Monday going door to door in the South trying to find terrorists and kill them. Because when 2,900 terrorists come into a country at one time, they don't all leave. They came, they left, they took, they killed, they pillaged. They don't all leave. So there are people, our boys, had to go door to door to find them. And I asked this young man, how are you doing? This was what his unit was busy doing. And he said to me somewhat cryptically, he said, I can't really think about it too much now, but I've had friends who've been injured in life-changing ways. I asked his father, what do you mean by that? His friend got shot and had his leg amputated. And this boy says to me, I can't think about it now because we have a job to do right now. When this is over, I'm going to have to unpack all of that. How? How's he going to unpack all of that? I don't know. It's okay to be very frightened. It's okay to lean into all of the emotions. I have a good friend. His name is Binyamin Pam. You may recognize the last name. It's a fairly well-known name in the Jewish community. His grandfather was Rav Pam. Binyamin, of all the grandchildren, was closest to Rav Pam. Because most of the other grandchildren, when they were teenagers, were busy learning. Binyamin wasn't. So the grandfather took him under his wing. And he used to spend time with him. And they had a chavrusa learning Mishnah Berurah. Pam loved Mishnah Berurah. And it made a tremendous impact. Binyamin is the sweetest, heart's a good person. And he told me that he was in Queens for Simchas Torah at his in-laws. And he was davening in Rabbi Oldham's shul in Queens. Rabbi Oldham's a big Talmud Chacham, big Hasidic Talmud Chacham. And he said that they were dancing and singing at the Hakafos. Every shul handled Hakafos a little bit differently, I think. Knowing what we knew, which was only a little bit, or we couldn't possibly comprehend exactly what had happened. I don't think we still can possibly comprehend exactly what had happened. So some shuls went on with normal. I have to say, I haven't heard a single report of a shul that had shtick and holubos and narishkeit going on during Hakafos. I assume it's because every shul had the sense to at least take life seriously. Or at least those that didn't are smart enough afterwards not to report back on that. That's also a type of shul. And he said that he couldn't dance, he couldn't sing. So he was sitting in the corner saying TEHILLIM. And Rabbi Oldham came over to him. Rabbi Oldham said to him the following. He said, Kriyas Yamsuf, the Malachim wanted to sing Shir. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chazal tell us, a very famous line to stop the Malachim from singing Shir. Right? Masa Yadai, Tovim B'Yam, V'atem Omrim Shira. And there's an obvious question that everyone asks. Show the basket, throw the basket, everyone's got a mahalish. The obvious question is there was a pretty famous song that emerged from Kriyas Yamsuf. We say it pretty much every day, hopefully every day. We all sang Shira. We sang Shira at Kriyas Yamsuf. What happened to Masiyada? What happened to the loss of human life, precluding the possibility of singing Shira? So everyone has their own mahal. Rabbi Oldham said to Binyamin, I don't know if it's from a Medrash, from a Rishon, from an Achron, I'm sure Rav Willig or the Talmid Chacham will be able to tell me. Rav Aryeh said something I thought was so insightful. He said, Malachim can only do one thing at a time. If a Malach is singing Shiva, then he's not crying. If a Malach is crying, he's not singing Shiva. A human being can do multiple things at a time. A human being can appreciate and be impacted by a tremendous loss of human life, and at the same time also sing Shiva. I think it's almost like symbolic of this entire horrific tkufa. That it happens on the day. Is it the happiest day on the Jewish calendar or not? It's certainly the day where we express the most overt happiness on the Jewish calendar. And this happens on that day. And maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling us that in the reaction, there's going to have to be a complexity of emotions. There's going to be great pride and great fear and great terror and great love, but all of it should be great. We can feel all of these things with a full heart. The second message from this medrash that I think is important to recognize is that sometimes the world, in fact, changes. Sometimes events happen that are impactful, but sometimes events happen that are world changing. The society you knew before is not the society you know afterwards. I had the opportunity to speak to my Chavrus Rav Aryeh shlita last week, and he's this impossibly positive person. So he said, Sinas Chinam Zod, it's never happening again. It's never happening again. It just can't be. He said, if you were here, you would know, you would agree. Yes, okay, I'm not arguing with that. So right now. Halavai. But there's a feeling that they're living in a different world than the world that existed 2 weeks ago. In America, there's a pre-Civil War United States of America and a post-Civil War United States of America. We all knew people who were Holocaust survivors who lived in 2 worlds. There was a pre-Churban world and a post-Churban world. We all lived through pre-9/11 and post-9/11. We know what it means to live in 2 different worlds. They say that Rav Berger mentioned that Rav Gifter was once asked where he was more emotionally moved, when he went to Kever Rachel or when he went to the Kotel. And he said the Kotel. Because Rav Gifter, although he was an American kid from Virginia, graduate of our yeshiva, I don't know if he graduated, but went to our yeshiva. He learned to tell in Europe. He saw Churban. So he said, I've seen Churban, I know what Churban looks like. And it just hits me differently when I see Churban again, which, by the way, this also speaks to the complexity of emotion. When you go to the Kotel, and so we're schmoozing, we're talking, everything's great. We have to be mindful of the fact that we're zoche to be at the Kotel, as Rav Willig referred to before, in 1967, what we gained, that we're able to be there. And if you've ever heard Rav Willig speak about that day, you appreciate so much more the emotion that we should feel of gratitude, our hearts are told to the Ribbon Shalom, and at the same time, we have to appreciate that it symbolizes that there's Korban, because what's on the other side of the wall is not what's supposed to be on the other side of the wall. Rav Pam went to the Kotel once. He couldn't handle it, he couldn't go back. He said, people were schmoozing. They were just schmoozing. Like it was, cavalierly just having conversations in a place like that. He couldn't believe it. A person should be feeling when they're in such a makom kadosh. And if it's true that we're living in a different world, and I believe it is true, I think it behooves us to be different people. We have to adjust to the generation. We're not just living in a Dor, we're living in the Dor Osad. If we think back to what changed in our lives, pre-COVID and post-COVID, and we can't think of a single Hanhaga Tov, a single Diktuk B'mitzvos, a single something that we carried with us, that we do personally, then we probably failed the test of COVID on some level. If we think back to very positive things in our lives, and we can't think of a single thing that changed. Rabbi Yisrael Reisman from Torah Das once mentioned to me that during his week of Shavuot Brachos, he was davening with his father, Shabbos, and he saw his father putting on Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. He said, Dad, Tati, I don't know what he calls his father. He said, since when? Since when do you put on Rabbeinu Tam tefillin? He said, since I was zechuyos to marry off a child. Something like that happens in my life. Mind you, this is a person who also lost a child and went through the Holocaust. Seen plenty of churban. If something good happens in my life, I have to be different for it. I have to do something different. And I'm not talking about like grand changes that are mostly societal in nature. Like the idea that we all felt that there's not going to be any more fighting in Klal Yisrael after the 3 boys, or that there's going to be no more irresponsible spending on simchas after COVID. Those were pipe dreams. Halavai, they should become true one day. But like us as individuals. Now I'm hopeful that in 10 years from now, in 20 years from now, I'll meet some of you on the street, somewhere in the streets of Yerushalayim after we have Geula. And you're going to say, what did you do from the war of Simchas Torah and Tafshin Pei Dalet? Still keeping up that Hanaga? What did you do different? We should have something that we can always point back to and say, that's what changed in my life. Not only the East Tzara, the Din D'Oraisa of davening, there's a real mention of learning, and all of those things, and the money that we have to give, and we have to do all of those things. That's in the East Tzara. I think it's also part of the avodah to be mindful that we should take something with us from the East Tzara. Rav Asher Shlita pointed out this past week that when Yonah the Navi was on a boat with a bunch of Ovdei Avodah Zarah, and the boat capsizes, and everyone's looking, why did this happen? Whose fault is it? So Yonah, as Rav referred to just a moment ago as well, Yonah could have pointed to everybody else. There are a bunch of Ovdei Avodah Zarah. What he did is he looked inside of himself. I'm going to do something that I'm hesitant to do, but I feel like it's the only way that I'm going to keep myself honest with you. I'm going to share with you my Kabbalah from the Simchas Torah War of Tafshin Pei Dalet, so that one day you'll call me out. You'll see me and you'll say, "You still doing that?" But be ready. So I'm going to turn right back to you. Ask what your Kabbalah is. My Kabbalah is the following. I don't know if it will stick. Early indications are that I'm about 50-50 in the success rate. So far, I'm hoping to increase that. Gemara says in the Sefer Shabbos that Lachar Meir ve'Esrim we're going to have a big bechina of Mishmayim, and the Gemara gives us the questions in advance. And why do we call that Nisod? Speak to the one in crowd. Gives us all of the questions in advance. We know exactly what the questions are going to be. So one of the questions always struck me because I never knew how to answer it. Several questions actually, but one of the questions is Tzipisa Yeshua. And I can't think Kavati to the Torah, I know when I do that, and I know when I'm not doing that, and when I should be doing that. Basakta Gurya Gurya or Hashem, check. Tzipisa Yeshua. I can't think of a time where I designated time to be Motzai Yeshua. Even a second, just to take time out of my day to be Motzai Yeshua. So there's this amazing thing. In Shemona Esrei, you take 3 steps back, right? You do this, and then you say a little Yehiratzon. You mumble it really, really quickly. But you don't have to. It's not a din. You have to mumble it really, really quickly. The halacha is you're allowed, as far as I know, I'm asking for you're allowed, I think, to say slowly. Yehiratzon, sheyebanim beis hamikdash b'tehira v'yamein. And just be mindful for a moment. As I'm saying those words, and I say them out loud because it's something Parshas Noach, so you're allowed to say it out loud also. Just to be mindful for a moment. That this is my moment of the day, 3 times a day, to be Motzai Yeshua. And it's meaningful to me because we have the recognition that everything that happens, all of the sorrows, all of the difficulties, all of the challenges are here because we don't have Gubul of Yeshua. And when we have those things, these things won't happen. And I'm not suggesting that everyone does this. They may not talk to you. But something tiktok in halacha, something. I was just in West Hempstead earlier this evening, so I was texting the fellow who was hosting Rav Shechter. He said, "Yeah, Rav Shechter's doing a Q&A now." So I said, "Okay, when's he starting?" He said he has to sit down and have a malka first. A light bulb went on. This is a time of year, starting now, where Shabbos is going to be over earlier and earlier and earlier. So most of us are probably going to eat on Motzai Shabbos anyway for the next several months. Isn't this a great time to pick up and being makbid to have malka? Just having kavanah l'shem mitzvah. And then when summertime comes and it's really hard and you suffer Ashkenazic indigestion and everything else, okay, but you'll figure it out. It's a great time to pick up something new. We have so much to be sad for. So much terror, so much death, so much savagery, just unimaginable. We have so much to be proud of. The hundreds of millions of dollars literally that are poured into Eretz Yisrael, the amazing achtos, even those videos of the best of us dancing with the CHaYim. People all over Israel taking in full families. It's indescribable. We hope it lasts. We hope it leads to a Geula Shlema. But both of those things, whether it lasts and whether it leads to a Geula Shlema, are largely beyond our personal control. Perhaps our avoda is to live b'dorosai, to live with the full gamut of emotions, but also differently in this generation than in the generation that existed just 2 weeks ago.
Very good.